Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm RJ Kerr, and this is Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we're writing a D&D adventure in real time, so you can see every step of the process and the whole thought process that goes into creating a full-fledged narrative adventure. So, if you're joining us for the first time, we are continuing on with the adventure that we brainstormed in as part one of this ongoing series, where the characters are going to be hired by a community leader of a town that we now know as Sky Song Gulch to recover the only known deposit of our MacGuffin, something called cold iron, which has been lost in a glacial mine that we're calling the Berg, which is it's become kind of a mine slash fortress that was once ravaged by a magical disease. The community needs it to save themselves from the foretold coming of the Blood Good Sisters Hag Coven, and the players, or at least the characters rather, have are going to have been led to believe that the village plans to fight these powerful fae with the cold iron that's recovered. But when they return, they discover that the village actually intends to use the cold iron to pay off the coven, thus completing an ancient pact. And the party ends up having to decide whether to support this plan of empowering these powerful, malevolent fae, the hags, or convincing the community to fight back and oppose the hags, knowing that there's going to be consequences no matter what they choose. So last time we had done kind of a quick review of everything that we had built so far. And while there are still plenty of gaps in this adventure, we were noting that a lot of the gaps that exist now are ones that we could kind of fill up on the fly or just before a particular session if needed, with the exception, with a few notable exceptions. One being the big bad confrontation, which is what we were working on last time, and then a little bit of the magical font, the magical disruption that we've got going on in the Berg that we talked about, since it's a glacier set in the middle of a desert, right? And so it's sitting on a fountain of magical energy, hence why it became such an important place, and how we need to build out how that's going to affect magic that's cast there, that's used there. And then we haven't done anything with the reward, that being the last stage of the resolution, sort of what kind of happens in the aftermath as a result of the battle, or as a result of the confrontation with the big bad. And with that sort of treasure that we can litter throughout here, we haven't done anything with that yet either. So last time we were talking about the final encounter, really kind of fleshing that out, and we took some time sort of creating a villain. We had done the personalities of the Bloodgood sisters previously and a little bit about them from a role playing standpoint, but we hadn't really dug into their mechanics and their stat blocks. And so when we were sort of blocking this out in terms of what kind of difficulty the players, or the characters rather, should face, um, we had gone through some of the hag stat blocks that were available and decided that they were almost what we needed, but not quite. And so we spent a little time working on taking the green hag stat block and making a few changes to it. Specifically, changing up the attack action from just claws to more of a magical themed withering grasp. It could be melee or range, giving a little versatility, and then adding some legendary actions in here to kind of bring that action economy into balance, which we then threw out of balance by adding some mud mephit minions in here and giving our hag the ability to summon more mud mephits, with potentially each turn, depending on how she wants to spend her legendary actions. And we did that with intention because we've got three different levels, sort of three different choices that the characters can make. Um, well, two choices the characters can make in three levels of outcome, right? So they can choose to simply kind of wash their hands of the situation at the end and say, you know what, it's between the town and the hags and none of our business, and kind of walk away. Uh, or they can try to convince the hags, or to convince the town rather to fight against the hags. And in doing so, there's two possible outcomes. They can either fail to do so and end up in a situation where they have got to stand against Briar Bloodgood, the representative of the Bloodgood sisters. That's going to show up and her minions alone, or they can rally the town against the hags and have some support. And so, to keep things simple for us, if they do rally the town, instead of having to, you know, role or run combat with 50 NPCs, right? As every commoner of their town, grabs a pot shield and a broken table leg as a club and goes to battle. Instead, mechanically, we can make this more of a narrative thing where, we are just kind of saying that a certain number of the hag's minions are being taken care of by by the fighters that they've rallied and for the townspeople, lessening the threat that the characters have to face on their own. And if they fail to do so, then they have a much more significant threat. And so we took a balanced encounter, one that would be potentially deadly, so very difficult, and we beefed it up just a little bit to make it just that much more important to rouse the town, but not necessarily be an automatic TPK or an automatic failure if they choose not to if they fail to rouse the townspeople to support them. So with that kind of roughly blocked out, we can now turn to figuring out how they go about convincing the town to support them. And there's a couple ways that we could do that. So none of these are wrong, but there are specific ways that I personally prefer to kind of go about this. Right? There's the idea that we could make it just a sort of a simple town hall check, right? Like they get everybody together and and they make the characters make it, their argument or their impassioned plea, and they make one skill check and a persuasion check or an intimidation check or what have you, and if they succeed, then the town's on board. If they fail, then the town's not. Well, there's not necessarily anything. There's nothing wrong if that's how you choose to do this, but I will say that puts a lot riding on a single roll of the die. And it leaves very little margin for error. And it, other than giving advantage or disadvantage for good role play or a convincing argument, it doesn't give the characters a lot to work with, right? Because yes, they can make a convincing argument, they can get advantage, but it still comes down to, one skill check. And while having things hang on one skill check may seem dramatic, kind of in the sterility of writing this campaign, it will not be dramatic when it's time to sit down and actually play this. So the other two options then are to run this as as kind of like a skill challenge where kind of like what we're doing in the Berg with forging the cold iron armor, where you have a series of sort of montage cutscenes, right, where specific actions are being taken and the characters have to make a variety of skill checks and succeed so many of them before they fail so many others, and that could be really that could be a really good way to kind of run this as well, especially if you kind of get into the narration of it. But if you're going to get into kind of the real role play element of it, which I think really kind of this situation kind of really lends itself to, I think we should take. I think we should take a page out of a different RPG's rulebook, and we should use progress clocks for this. Now, this is kind of a nuanced difference between skill checks and progress clocks here in the sense that, yes, we're still making a series of ability checks, but they're each focused around narrative scenes. Um, and in this case, we can have two sort of competing clocks, right? Because we talked previously about the idea that there should be the chance that the players, screw this up so bad that they not only don't get the help of the town, but they actually get hindered by the town, right? There should be that ability that they frighten the town enough into thinking that who the hags are definitely, the Bloodgood sisters are definitely going to win against the adventurers, and are probably going to be upset with the town if the town doesn't do something to show the sisters that they're not backing these adventurers, they're not on their side. And so in a progress clock, what we're doing is we're setting up effectively well, it's graphically, it's a circle divided into a bunch of wedges, and each time the party ticks off, has a success, or on some of them has a failure, you fill in a wedge. And the idea is that when you fill up the clock, whatever that larger event gets triggered, right? So it's easier to demonstrate kind of graphically, and there's a ton of great videos on YouTube about running progress clocks in D&D. And they're very, very simple. But for our purposes, I think that we would want two in this, right? We want a progress clock that is tracking how close the party is to convincing the key people in town that they need to rise up and and best help them take on the hags. And then we should have a second clock that focuses on effectively significant failures and how many of those that they've had that kind of wind towards the triggering event of the town deciding that no, they actually need to hinder the characters. So how that might look is, let's make a new section here and let's do this. So let's say this isn't a good title for this section here. Reserve the right to edit. We're going to say rallying the town. Okay, so in this, let's do about it. Let's see here. The characters can attempt to rally the townsfolk against the Bloodgood sisters. To do so, they will need to convince, let's say, TK number of influential clearly I can't spell it right. There's a D in there. All right, of influential NPCs, we'll call them convince DK number of influential NPCs without actually we'll say convince TK number of influential NPCs. The let's see here, the argument to stand up, or I should say to fight back against such powerful Fae is a tricky proposition. However, If the um, I'll have to figure out how to word that, but effectively something of the effect like I'm thinking along the lines of, you know, they make the they make your you make your persuasion check, right? Let's say, for example, and if you succeed, great. It moves, one wedge closer to triggering full town support. If you fail, then hey, maybe it's a neutral. But if you fail by say, five or you know, by five or more, right? You needed a 15 and you got a 10 or a 9 or an 8 or what have you. Then it adds a wedge to the town's fear clock, if we will. We'll have to come up with some pithier names for those, although fear clock kind of works. So we'll kind of let's figure out how to word that. But let's start with saying they need to convince a number of influential NPCs, right? So, hmm, let's. I'm guessing for this, it's probably going to be like a DC 15. Um, but if I kind of want to check myself with that, I might go back to our Dungeon Master's Guide and go down to our social interaction section and kind of check out this. And let's say that, I'd say that um, they're probably friendly, having come back, having completed the mission, having been successful. There's probably a friendly attitude towards the characters, unless, they've just been absolute jerks. And so we kind of get this, it's a 10 if they are going to accept minor risk or sacrifice to do as asked, or 20 if it's a significant risk. I'd say it's a significant risk, but at the same time, setting up a series of progress, setting up a series of checks, as number of people that they have to check, that becomes you know, if they've got to get a DC 20 every single time. Well, that becomes really difficult to do. Um, so so this is where kind of like, yeah, I would split it down the middle. I'd say, hey, it's 15. It's harder than a 10. It's not as difficult as a 20. So let's call it a 15. So let's say to succeed, let's see here, to convince a an influential, God, even spelled in the previous sentence, I don't get it right. Influential NPC to support opposing the hags. The character must succeed on a DC 15 charisma, persuasion, or intimidation check. When I write these kind of skill checks, there's a reason that I put the charisma parentheses, and it's not just for notation to align with published D&D adventures. It's so that I can bear in mind that, well, yes, I may recommend that this is a charisma check. I may require this as a charisma check in a lot of cases. If a character came to me and was like, no, I want to use persuasion, but I want to make a really logical argument to them, then I might let them use make it a persuasion wisdom check or a persuasion intelligence check. Give your players some agency in changing this up. That yes, it should be a persuasion check of some kind, but the skill that's used might shift, or it might be an intimidation check, and the skill that's used might shift a little bit, or I should say the ability score that's used might shift a little bit. And so I just put those in there kind of as a personal reminder to myself. You don't have to spell it all out when you do this your way, but it is nice to let your players know that they have the ability to make a good argument for why their character should be able to use a different ability score, and affect what they have to roll in that capacity. Okay, cool. So kind of have. Yeah, we need to figure out. Well, we don't. We've already. We should figure out how many we need here. Um, hmm. So the number to succeed, my personal opinion, the number to succeed should be higher than the number to fail, right? It should be a little more challenging to convince a town to be brave and stand up against a powerful enemy than to you know than for them to give into their fears and kind of hold back. But you don't want to make these woefully unbalanced, so that there's just such a slim chance of success. So in this case, I'd kind of say maybe they got to convince six NPCs before they, fail four of them. You could tone it down a little bit and say they've got to, convince five before they fail three. You can make it a little closer. Especially since failing isn't automatically triggering one on the fear clock. Um, let's go with six. Let's start with six, and we'll see how we do affect that. Yeah, six into NPCs. Okay, the argument fight back problem is a tricky proposition. However, if a check fails by five or more, it triggers it triggers it frightens. Let's hear it. Not only fails to persuade the NPC, but frightens them. I should say it makes them afraid. It makes them afraid of potential retaliation from the Blood Good Sisters. If four or more NPCs become frightened in this way before six are convinced. But rather than before six are convinced, the town decides to side with the Blood Good Sisters in the coming confrontation. Cool. Okay, so we've got this all sketched out. We might want to put in here kind of a list of potential. What size header is that? Two. Okay, cool. Put in here kind of a list of potential NPCs. You don't have to just kind of make them up on the fly here. Let's see, list. And we can fill that out later. These NPCs, they don't need as much to them as everybody else necessarily. I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with giving them, the full treatment of, like an objective, a motivation, a misbelief, all that kind of stuff. But these can be really kind of simple NPCs because they're really just here for one middling interaction, right? And we're gonna need at least six of them in this case, which is an argument for doing fewer than these. But six just feels more realistic to me. You get six influential people in a town this size, and yeah, they can make a big difference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we'll say 8 on the off chance that, it's getting really close. You fail 2. Theoretically, we might, I guess the max we could need is 9. We might as well put them on there. Why cheap out? One of them can be our community leader, right? Because they would be an obvious choice. They're clearly influential enough to hire adventurers. Um, and then we can kind of fill in the others. Um, you know, Maybe as we flesh everything out and other people kind of pop up to us, but also perhaps um, as we, uh, we may just kind of think them up towards the end here. Um, cool. So with those in mind, let's see here. We should now have a place of, let's see here. For the final encounter, let's call this, because whatever the outcome of this, the players still have a choice. The characters still have a decision to make, right? You know, because if the town decides to oppose them, they may decide, you know what, this is more trouble than it's worth. We're gonna peace out. There's nothing that says they're locked into this choice to fight. Um, so we should say, we'll say the final decision. After attempting to convince the town, characters must choose the path they will take. Cool. It occurs to me that we actually have 4 things we need to build out here. 2 are obvious. One, they walk away. Another one, they rouse the town against the hags, and now they have some help. But if they fail to rouse the town, they can either fail kind of neutrally in terms of, they don't succeed to convince enough people, or they scare everybody, and now they're opposed. So, which might complicate our thing up here. Now that I think about it, because we might need to work in a failure state that's a more neutral failure state. Let's make a note to ourselves so we can come back to that. Let's say comments, add neutral failure state, mark. And this is the thing, right? Like, you build something out and you go, ooh, there's another option they might take here that becomes obvious to you as you run your way through it. And then you need to either go back through and build in a consideration for that option, or if you're starting to kind of get a Rube Goldberg machine kind of going on, you need to go back through and think about how to simplify, how to return this to a place that's easy to run. Because ultimately, you don't want to get in your own way when you're writing adventures. You want them to be easy for you as the DM to run and to feel seamless when you're playing them. So we're going to have to come back to that. After attempting to convince the town, the characters and choose the paths they will take. Right. So they're going to need extreme failure state, right? So they need a choose to stand against hags despite the town. TBD. Because we need something here, something that the villagers, the townspeople would do to stand in the way of the adventurers. What I don't want to do here is add enemies to the final confrontation, right? Because we already have a particularly tricky one going on here. We already have one that is going to be very difficult for our characters. Um, so, maybe. But we should have something that's still a setback in some capacity. Something that is going to hinder the players without increasing the challenge rating. Hmm. Hmm. Well, let's think about this. All right, so let's envision the narrative confrontation in our minds on this because something might present itself. This is something that I do when I'm in a place where I know there's something I need here and I'm not sure what it is. I try to put myself um, visually into the situation, right? So I so we've got this village, this town that's built into the walls of these plateaus, these mesas. So it's a big vertical um, battleground, right? And it's crisscrossed with all of these uh, with all these bridges that run across, and you kind of got these winds whipping through here. Um, so we've already got oh, our hag should be able to fly. God, that's so obvious to me. That might affect our balancing here. Yeah, because the real. Oh, yeah. This is kind of separate to this, but the real. Yeah, because this is such a vertical combat encounter. There's so many different levels to this with the crisscross of bridges, and we have a situation where, we could have players having to stand on the bridges and jumping across and lots of ranged attacks and kind of a very complicated area of mobility, and we already have flight in the methods. Well, our blood good sister should have like a broom of flying, shouldn't she? Because she should be mobile. She should be a hell of a lot more mobile. Okay, so we're gonna need to add that in. um, let's see, broom of flying. That may not ultimately affect our balancing here. So we may not need to change that much because flying does not change your challenge rating, but that ability to be extra mobile might, since this isn't kind of like just an on the ground assault like a lot of this sort of situations would be. So, hmm. So it doesn't affect how the town stands against. Okay, so they're up there. They got their bows and their arrows, their spears, that kind of stuff, and javelins, and they take on a section of methods, right? Half the mud methods at a time, destroying them in 2 rounds. Two, so that probably stands. All right, walking away is pretty simple. Facing the Briar Blade or minions is pretty straightforward, and then how does the town oppose them here? Hmm. Well, they could remove bridges. Ooh. Yeah. We could do a hazard action kind of deal, right? Where they're not going to fight the characters specifically, but they might, you know, spend a round, undoing, fastening um, the the bridges on one side so that they fall and now the characters have got to jump off and catch themselves onto the other bridges they fall past, all that kind of stuff. Oh, I kind of like that. It makes this a really dicey fight. Um, hmm. All right, all right. Let's put it down. We're just slapping clay on the wheel here. We can always hone it later to something a little more balanced. But let's get the idea down. All right, so um, um, if the characters frighten the townspeople instead of rallying them, townsfolk side with the Bloodgood sisters. They will not attack the characters directly, but they but they will cut bridges that the characters occupy during the combat encounter. We need a mechanic for that. So let's say these bridges are kind of semi-permanent things, right? Like, so it's not just a simple, one action unplugs them, but there's multiple yes, but there's multiple townsfolk who could be working on it. But we don't want to say that, every bridge goes down at once. It should just be a cluster of them because most people are probably hiding. They're afraid, right? So, and there's, a battle raging outside. We also kind of want to give the characters the opportunity to, frankly, to shoot arrows or spells or whatever the townsfolk to keep them from unfastening, from unsecuring one of the bridges potentially. So we could say, So we say let's think of this maybe more as a trap than because narratively it's people working, but mechanically it might be more of a trap. So let's say on initiative count 10, a team of townsfolk unsecure, or let's say we should say cut one side of one bridge. Characters on the bridge can, I should say, on the bridge when it falls must make a DC, I don't know, 12 dexterity saving throw to to jump onto a nearby stable bridge. Nearby stable bridge. Failure results in. I don't want to say that it's just straight fall damage, right? Like, I mean, it's going to be fall damage, but we don't want it to say, oh, it's from whatever height down to the base of the gulch, right? Because these bridges are 50 feet up, and you just happen to be on one, or I should say, you happen to be on one that's 50 feet up. Then, you plummet down, and you take 5d6 damage, and that could be lethal to a character of this level, depending on where they are. That could be a big, big problem. We don't want this to be lethal. We don't want the townspeople to be responsible for the death of a player. We want them to be a setback, or the death of a character. We want them to be a setback. So let's say here, let's say that on a failure, because these are also kind of crisscrossing bridges. Like, so the odds are that unless you're on a really, one of the lowest ones, there's gonna be a, you know, there's gonna be another bridge below you, right? So you're not gonna fall to the ground. You're gonna fall to a bridge. So let's say on a failure, character, I guess I should say creatures because it would affect all creatures on here. Creatures on the bridge without a flying speed. Let's see, your creatures fall 20 feet to a lower bridge or the ground if they're on the lowest level. Taking 2d6 bludgeoning damage. Cool. All right, so now we kind of have a little bit of a trap here, which means that we can add the countermeasure of maybe attacking one of the town, maybe attacking the townspeople there, delays them for a round, so it doesn't perhaps stop them, but it maybe prevents them from doing it the following round. Or maybe it does. Maybe you can, scare them off effectively. So, again, keeping it simple for ourselves here. So, let's see here. We'll do countermeasure. The character, let's see. Characters can impede or cease compete or stop townsfolk by attacking those cutting the bridges. They're commoners, right? So I think they're what, AC 10 or something like that. I mean, let's check. Commoner. Yeah, I want to say they're like AC 10, HP 4, right? Okay, so yeah, so armor class 10. All right, so attacking collectively attacking. The group has AC of 10, and we'll say there's 4 of them, so we'll say it's 16 hit points and 16 hit points collectively. After, let's see here. After losing 8 hit points, they can only cut 1 bridge every other round. That's probably a cleaner way to word that. But effectively, the idea being that, like, there's a group of four of them, right? And you attack, on a greater AC, you're gonna hit one of them. They've got 4 HP each, so it's total is 16. And then you take one of them out, and it doesn't inhibit them too much. But then after half of them are down, well, then it halves their speed. So now, they can only do one bridge every other round, which again incentivizes the characters to maybe spend a little time trying to you know mess up these townsfolk that are standing against them. Cool. So that gives us kind of the gambit here of stuff. We'll make a little note to ourselves. Let's see here. The characters depart without incident, leaving Sky Song Gulch to the in the clutches Blood Good Sisters. Future repercussions. I think it's repercussions. I probably misspelled that. Yep, I did. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to run the gambit here of the four various outcomes that, or the four various paths that the players could choose. Choosing to walk away. Writing this is kind of a one shot without it being part of a larger campaign, or not really one shot, but a standalone without it being part of a larger campaign. It's difficult to write out what those future repercussions could be. If we were writing this as part of a larger adventure that Skysong Gulch is going to be a part of, or influences in some capacity, even if the players are never planning on coming back here, it being a hag-owned town now is problematic to the region. That would have effects that would be somewhat far-reaching. So that's something that we could build into a later adventure. Again, adds track for us to build off of here. But there should definitely be a negative repercussion for the characters and for the campaign as a whole, making things in the future much more difficult if the characters just say, you know what, that's the hags are the town's problem, and they walk off. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a pin in it here, because we've got pretty much what we need for the big bad encounter kind of sketched out. Again, there's some gaps, how do they realize what's going on here? But this doesn't need to be really robust. These should be pretty obvious things that the players, or rather the characters, notice when they come back into town. Obvious observations that suggest what's going on, and that frankly, after they turn over the cold iron, the community leader or somebody is just going to flat out tell them, hey, thank you for your help. Maybe you don't want to be here. We're going to turn this over to the hags, yada, 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 kind of deal. And we can flesh that out a little bit later, especially when we're kind of going through to clean everything up. But I think we've got the bones of our big bad encounter put together here. I'm sorry, I've been on my full face here for a minute, so you kind of haven't seen some of the things I've added in. Apologies for that. So I was thinking through this. But yeah, so we've got our kind of what we've typed out here in terms of choosing to stand against the hags, and choosing to walk away. So I think we've got what we need for this. So that means that next time, I think I really want to focus on this font of magic, the magical reactions element here that we get. I've got some thoughts on that. We'll save really digging into them for next time, but I I'm leaning towards using some of uh, the unraveling magic kind of mechanics from Tasha's, as opposed to using the wild magic surge kind of stuff. And the reason for some of that is, frankly, I think it'll be a little more balanced. But we don't need to get into that right now. We can talk about that next time when we actually dig into magic reactions and the font of magic. So, anyway, let's go ahead and put a pin in this here now. Thank you so much for watching. As you know, I'm RJ Kerr, and this is our Let's Write Adventure series. If you've enjoyed this video, you've been enjoying this series, please like and subscribe, hit the little bell icon, comment if you like. All that kind of stuff helps grow the channel and helps me be able to keep doing this kind of stuff. So I really appreciate your support. If you are enjoying this template that we're using in Notion here, you can get your own copy of it in the links to this video. So you can start writing your own adventures using the Notion template. It's free, help yourself. If you want to see the kind of adventure that I've written using this methodology, you can check out Plague Breakers on the DM's Guild. Again, the link for that is in the comment or in the description of this video. It's free to download. You can get your copy and see what what kind of gets built out from that. And then last but not least, please check out my other adventures. Check out my links in my description. I posted, or have created rather, a handy little notebook for keeping session notes during your games. It's a great tool. You can get that off Amazon as well. Again, links for that are in my channel links. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. We're not going to be here next week because I am at a wedding, but we'll be here the following week. So we're going to pick up with our next live stream, and that's going to be part 14 on the 8th of June. We'll be at that, 8th of June. So thank you again, and I will see you next time.